And we said then the ayah continues that the theme is that dunya is not the focus. And we talked about that al-mal wal-banun, that wealth, children, family, those are all things that more of a cosmetics in dunya, but don't make up the actual core. We said how Allah gave us mountains, and that just as mountains, we would see them as the symbol of steadfast, or the symbol of something that is strong and firm, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was saying that no, even these firm things, they're actually going to be going as well, just as people's wealth, just as people's lives, just as everything that you see around you is going to go away, including everything that's on earth, including the mountains. And then we continued and said how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us that everything will be exposed, all people will be exposed, and they will be lined up in rows, and they will be exposed with their actions, they'll be exposed with everything that they had done, and that's all that matters. And why they should be concerned about the most important thing in their life, which is what they prepared for that day. And we said, وَوُضِعَ الْكِتَابِ, on that day the book will be distributed based on people's actions. And then the mujrimeen, and we talked about who's a criminal, and what defines evil actions. And we talked about the book, and we said that here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says وَلَا يَظْلِمُ رَبُّكَ أَحَدًا, relating to why were they called mujrimeen, and that there's a whole court that involves records in the kitab, that involves witnesses, that involves an action, that involves a record, a written record, videos, and that will involve different things to actually talk and witness what had happened. And that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says وَلَا يَظْلِمُ. يَظْلِمُ is more relating to a trial, is more relating to oppression. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, and He doesn't oppress, meaning that there's a trial, there's a court, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not oppress those people that took the decision with their free will, and took the decision to do a different action. وَإِذْ قُلْنَا لِلْمَلَائِكَةِ. Now it takes us into, all right, a different story. But how is the second story related to the first story? How is this story related to the story before it? This ayah is actually telling us that the book is now given, but it was put forward, and now all the criminals are feeling remorse, sad for what they have found in it, and they would say, what kind of a book this is. And speaking of all the remorse, this book does not leave, does not exclude, not a small thing and not a big thing, but put it into an account. And they found everything that they had done, hadira, prepared right before their eyes in a complete record. And your Lord does not oppress anyone. وَإِذْ قُلْنَا لِلْمَلَائِكَةِ. And وَإِذْ means and remember. Remember. What does that have to do remember with? Remember what? That the story began. This is the end, but the story actually began when it was discussing, and the story began when it was discussing with the malaika that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wanted to create a creature. The malaika did not know who that creature was, why that creature is being created. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala orders the malaika to do sujood, prostrate for Adam. فَسَجَدُوا إِلَّا إِبْلِيسَ. This fa actually means that they right away made the sujood. This is not وَسَجَدُوا. If it would have said وَسَجَدُوا, means that there was some kind of a time. But فَسَجَدُوا means right away. Remember, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says about the malaika, they don't argue with Allah. they don't have any free will to disagree. They just do what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling them. Now why the malaika? Well, the malaika were ordered to do sujood because everything that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created was actually created for Adam's subjugation and for Adam meaning mankind, for Adam to make use of it for the test. So here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us that even the highest of the creatures, which is the malaika, although they were created before Adam, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ordered them to do sujood for Adam. فَسَجَدُوا إِلَّا إِبْلِيسَ. Let me go back to the most important story in Surah al-Baqarah. In Surah al-Baqarah, it tells us the details of the story. The details of the story is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala قُلْنَا لِلْمَلَائِكَةِ اسْجُدُوا لِآدَمَ, and we told the malaika to prostrate for Adam. فَسَجَدُوا إِلَّا إِبْلِيسَ. Sajadu, they all prostrated except Iblis. Now, before that, the malaika, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, إِنِّي جَاعِلٌ فِي الْأَرْضِ خَلِيفَةً, they said, أَتَجْعَلُ فِيهَا مَن يُفْسِدُ فِيهَا وَيَسْفِكُ الدِّمَاءَ وَنَحْنُ نُسَبِّحُ بِحَمْدِكَ وَنُقَدِّسُ لَكَ. Are you going to, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَإِذْ قُلْنَا لِلْمَلَائِكَةِ, when we told the malaika, I'm going to create another creature. The word khalifa, it doesn't mean caliphate. Khalifa comes from the word khalafa, means an after creation. So they said, أَتَجْعَلُ فِيهَا مَن يُفْسِدُ فِيهَا وَيَسْفِكُ الدِّمَاءَ وَنَحْنُ نُسَبِّحُ بِحَمْدِكَ وَنُقَدِّسُ لَكَ. So they said, are you going to create a creature that's going to cause chaos, destruction, and bloodshed? Bloodshed? What bloodshed? If it's talking about the jinn don't have blood. What creation is that? It was another creation. And scholars had different opinions on whether that was the jinn or whether that was another creature. But this creature, whatever it is, it seems like it did not have mind. And this creature was causing bloodshed on earth. It seems like it was a wild creature because they were definitely causing chaos. And the malaika knew that this creature was causing some chaos on earth and lots of bloodshed. Was it like a human? Did they see that there was this other creature, there was another creature that was causing bloodshed? Well, they knew that there was another creature that was created that was causing all this chaos, but definitely it was not a thinking creature. Is it those things that were looking like humans before evolution and all that stuff? Allahu A'lam. Regardless, let's continue. So now the malaika, they say that, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, I know what you don't know. قال إني أعلم ما لا تعلمون وعلم آدم الأسماء كلها, and he taught Adam the names of things. It wasn't the name to mean the names of things as much as it was basically gave Adam intellect. Now the malaika were asked to name those things, but they said, قالوا سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا. Glory be unto you, we don't know except what you have taught us. Meaning, malaika don't have that intellect. Fast forward. The malaika then realize that this Adam creature is actually different than the previous creature and actually has intellect, capable of understanding, capable of processing knowledge, capable of memorizing, capable of answering questions and making a dialogue. Different. The malaika then, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala asked them to make the sujood. Now here's the story within that part. What's the whole issue? The whole issue, the malaika are asked to make the sujood. The malaika all make sujood. Iblis refuses. Iblis then debates, but ask the question. And he actually said, why are you asking me to prostrate for him when I was created from fire and he was created from clay? According to his calculation, or what he thought was smart, is that he, as fire, would have more energy than clay. That's what he assumed. So now, wanting to test Adam, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us that the story began there. The story of your life began when Iblis refused to prostrate, and the theme of the story is that اهبطوا منها جميعا فإما يأتينكم مني هدى فمن تبع هداي فلا يضل ولا يشقى. Then go down on earth. Now you've got the free will. Now you've got the ability to recognize right and wrong. And بعضكم لبعض عدو. You, as Adam and Eve, you're going to be, it's a perpetual, it's an ever enemy. That's shaitan. He's going to use different ways to manipulate Adam. Like it was being smart, or use some kind of a pattern. And this age especially is probably, I would consider, wallahu a'lam, is one of the most ages, although science, degrees, education is the highest compared to any era, any year in history, but man seems to be the most manipulated during our time. And ignorant. It is so strange how these paradoxes happen to be in our era, even though they have the most education, but the simplest things that the Stone Age man, if there was ever such a thing, probably knows more about life than our time.
But that's a very, because I abuse people more in my house when like the first time you teach me something new, the second thing I realize when I go home, I used to be a kind and nice and understanding person. All of a sudden I'm not understanding. I abuse people for like 6 months, and then the knowledge starts to sink in. So it's a very easy thing as a human being. The more knowledge you get, the more I easily get lost in things.
Yep, subhanallah. Now, إِلَّا إِبْلِيسَ كَانَ مِنَ الْجِنِّ. So Iblis was part of the jinn. Are the jinn shayateen, or are the shayateen part of the jinn? Well, this ayah is clearly identifying that Iblis was from the jinn. The jinn are separate creatures from humans. But shaitan is a word that is used to mean shatana, somebody that is far from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So are the shayateen other creatures than the jinn, or are the shayateen the bad jinn within the jinn? Different opinions between scholars. Are you with me here, or did you get lost? All right, good.
I want to know. So was he in paradise with them? Sorry.
The stories that Iblis was Tawus al-Malaika, that he was the peacock of the angels, is actually not authentic. Okay. Yeah, those are not authentic. Iblis was not from the Malaika, he was actually from the jinn, as clearly mentioned in this ayah. So it's not that he was an angel and then he became a jinn. All right. So what about the exception? So Iblis, here it says that we ordered the malaika to do sujood. And when we say except Iblis refused, is actually telling you that sometimes the order can be given to everybody. And say, okay, everybody make sujood. Okay? The order was for the malaika and the order was for everybody else. Alright? But malaika, they never go against the order of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but jinn have free will. Okay? Jinn have free will. And that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala actually says, except Iblis, he was from the jinn, not from the malaika. Because malaika don't have free will. They never go against the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
So then, because they have free will they be judged also?
Malaika don't have free will. Jinn have free will. That's
jinn,
why
will
the
they
jinn.
be judged?
Oh, absolutely, they'll be held accountable. Of course. And that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ. That the Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created al-jinn wal-ins, jinn and insan, or humans, only to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In other words, they will be tested within worship.
Okay.
They will be tested in their obedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because the word worship in Islam is a lot more comprehensive than a ritual. The word worship is a lot more comprehensive than a ritual. It's not just a ritual. No, it's in each and every single details in your life. Every single detail is considered worship in Islam. Even in the relationship between you and your husband. It's actually worship. فَفَسَقَ عَنْ أَمْرِ رَبِّهِ فَفَسَقَ عَنْ أَمْرِ رَبِّهِ فَفَسَقَ, you could see that the word فَفَسَقَ, meaning that he فَسَقَ. فَسَقَ means to openly reject Allah's orders. Openly reject Allah's orders. What does it mean, openly reject Allah's orders? So when you say openly, that means that the person determined, the person insisted, and the person openly went against Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So when we say, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us from those, that the person is fasiq, meaning that they openly announce going against Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's orders. Openly. There's a difference between hiding your sin, and in fact the Prophet ﷺ actually says that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had cursed al-mujahirun. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala cursed those that, mujahirun, what is mujahirun? The people that announce their sin. What does that have to do with anything? Announce their sin, meaning that they would announce what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had kept private for them. At one point, for example, makes a sin at night. And the second day, they're boasting and bragging about it and happy and open about it to tell everybody what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had covered up for them.
Easy now.
It's easy to do that, you know, especially if you go out, like last night was lit.
Yeah. All right. So, فَفَسَقَ عَنْ أَمْرِ رَبِّهِ فَفَسَقَ عَنْ أَمْرِ رَبِّهِ means that he openly went against Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Of course, openly went against Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by arguing with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Why are you asking me to do sujood for him when you created me from something better than him? The first thing that Iblis had done was the egocentric. What is egocentric? Egocentric when you think that when you think through the lens of your own self, your own ego, as if it was the center of things, and you look through the world within that center. And you would look at others from the center of your own self and see others less than you. That's the first thing that Iblis committed. The second part is that Iblis not only saw himself as a center, but he dared to openly go against Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's order. The third thing that he did was that he continued and he told Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, give me some time and I'll prove to you that I will be able to delude them in order to prove to you that I'm a better creature than them. Just give me some time. Just give me some time to prove to you that I really am better than them. That's where the story began. How do you continue your story? That's where the story began. It began with Adam, and it began with the theme that it was your free will, your intellect, and another creature that's working in battle with you to take you into another direction by using your intellect to mislead you. Your intellect to mislead you. And of course, it's not to say what the Christians and Jews say, that means that intellect is a bad thing. No. It's just telling us that our own intellect is not capable of knowing all the truth. Our intellect is not capable of knowing all the truth. Our intellect may sometimes be misleading, and we would think we got the whole picture. أَفَتَتَّخِذُونَهُ وَذُرِّيَّتَهُ أَوْلِيَاءَ. Do you take him, Iblis, وَذُرِّيَّتَهُ. ذُرِّيَّتَهُ means his children, meaning that they reproduce. There's family. They've got, the jinn, the shayateen. There's a whole tribe, there's a whole group. Do you take him and his offspring, awliya? What is awliya? Awliya means supporters. Awliya means leaders. And awliya can also mean a superior. Awliya can mean a number of things. But here, awliya, and this is really important to say, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had forbid to take certain awliya. Number one, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forbid that we take the shayateen as awliya, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forbid that we take the kuffar as awliya. But why? Because when we talk about il-wali is supposed to be the leader to help you identify things. So the wali can be the leader to help you identify things or to help you do the decision making. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forbid that we take the kuffar as awliya. And especially in our time, this is a really dangerous thing, because at many times, without us realizing, we are just so much in rush to engage in politics, and we don't realize at many times that we are being, mentored towards something that is against Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and against the principles of Islam. And we would think, as long as I'm being active, I'm doing it for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If you want to do something for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it has to be from the beginning something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had actually permitted to be in that way. On a side, I looked for Muslim retreats online. I do chaplaincy, and I was asked to do a Muslim women's retreat in the university that I'm in. So I Googled online and saw what kind of retreats are there. What do they do? What do they look like? And I was so surprised to see that the most popular retreat was an LGBTQI plus, whatever they call it, Muslim retreat.
What?
Muslim retreat.
Yeah.
So I forgot where it was done, but anyhow, so I opened it up to see what they did in their retreat, like their schedule. The schedule, I think, began at 9 a.m. It starts out with dhikr. They called out the names, I forgot where it was, wallahi. They called out the names of those that were considered as the pioneers for this retreat. And they called out different names. They were so lined up and behind a speaker and etc. And while they said, we managed to get this retreat by these names and etc., they go on the stage doing takbir on the stage. Allahu Akbar wa lillahi alhamd. The details of the retreat, Salat al-Asr, and then they would give a talk, Salat al-Dhuhr, and Salat al-Maghrib, and then a talk, and a time for dhikr, a time for tabling, and etc. And subhanallah, part of that is that it was saying that, okay, well, you can pray wherever you want, however you want, Muslim and men and women together, and everything, and then called it a Muslim retreat. SubhanAllah, when you look at that, deviation starts with a little inclination, and then it takes you very far. When your awliya are deviated, you can take a lot of symbols of Islam, but that's not what makes Islam. What makes Islam is the beginning, is the tawheed of Islam in the beginning, in where you would have your lens to look at things from Quran and Sunnah. That's al-awliya. Al-awliya starts from the beginning. How do you see things? What image? What perspective? Remember what I said about Ibn Arabi, or Ibn al-Arabi, when he said about Abu Hanifa. Do you guys remember what I said about him? Let's remember. Abu Hanifa Ibn al-Arabi was a Maliki scholar. He came across an ayah. The ayah says, وَآتُوا حَقَّهُ يَوْمَ حَصَادِهِ. آتُوا حَقَّهُ يَوْمَ حَصَادِهِ. Give those, that agriculture, its right on the day of its harvest. According to the Maliki madhab, not everything that the earth grows, meaning not every agriculture you pay its zakah. According to Hanafi madhab, everything that the earth grows, you have to pay zakah for it if you're a farmer and you're doing it as a business. Ibn al-Arabi, when he came across this ayah, Ibn al-Arabi was a Maliki madhab. Ibn al-Arabi said about Abu Hanifa, he said, as for Abu Hanifa, he made the Quran be the lens that he sees the world through. And he said, for every single thing that the earth grows, you must pay zakah for it, based on this ayah. And look at this. He was not blinded by madhab fanaticism, but he was in search for truth. And he was in search for the preponderant ruling, regardless of who says it. Right there. The theme that we want to take note of is how he said, as for Abu Hanifa, he made the Quran be the lens which he sees truth through. And he was able to find the truth. Now, when we look at awliya here can be educational awliya, people to define right and wrong for you. Awliya can be those that are driving you towards a certain political activism, economical activism, decisions in how you make things in life. You cannot have those awliya, deviated awliya, because the second you have deviated awliya, you too are going to be deviated yourself.
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
My biggest challenge in my life is my free time. You know, that time on work, and then you have an hour, and then there's nothing. Shaitan becomes easily my awliya, because that time something will just come, like either it's a phone call, some news. I know there's hard gossip here. I can stay away. I know the wrong and the right. Even food, you know, food is the worst thing. If I just overeat, and I know how, if I eat this food, Maghrib is coming, I'm gonna pray. Then that time you just like, the awliya comes in and shaitan and the nafs like azam, just take it. I give in. The days I don't give in, alhamdulillah, I'm standing.
Right. So that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is
at personal level with shaitan when he whispers.
So generally, that's a good question. Can awliya be also where it's our own inclination, our own human inclination, our own nafs? Well, the whispers actually come from shayateen. generally, whenever something is controlling or motivating you, in other words, acts as a motivator or acts as that area that pushes you towards a certain direction, that's going to be the wali. What's the evidence? The evidence is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Surah al-Nazi'at actually says, فَأَمَّا مَنْ خَافَ مَقَامَ رَبِّهِ وَنَهَى النَّفْسَ عَنِ الْهَوَى. Those that fear their Lord's position and they prevent their nafs, that is human inclination, the pleasures, from acting as il-hawa, as acting as the piece of hawa, those inclinations. And those would be the areas to motivate them, to control their inclinations. Those would be the people that are going to, the ones that prevented those inclinations to control them are going to be the ones in Jannah. As for those that let those inclinations control them, those are going to be going to hellfire. Now, inclinations, it depends on what inclination are you using, who, and for what reason. And that's when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala actually talks about أَمَّا مَنْ خَافَ مَقَامَ رَبِّهِ وَنَهَى النَّفْسَ عَنِ الْهَوَى فَإِنَّ الْجَنَّةَ هِيَ الْمَأْوَى. But for the first one, the ones that would follow their inclination are basically the people that are going to be إِنْهُمْ كَالْأَنْعَامِ بَلْ هُمْ أَضَلُّ سَبِيلًا. But they're actually as animals. In fact, they're even more led astray. Why? Because they followed and they let their inclinations, their pleasures lead the way, and not what principles Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put forward. And then they would get lost within that. وَهُمْ لَكُمْ عَدُوٌّ. وَهُمْ لَكُمْ, meaning here, and the ones that are your enemies are actually the Iblis and his offspring. Why وَهُمْ لَكُمْ عَدُوٌّ؟ بِئْسَ لِلظَّالِمِينَ بَدَلًا. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us that do you take Iblis and his offspring as your leaders instead of me, like an alternative instead of me, when they're actually your enemy? بِئْسَ لِلظَّالِمِينَ بَدَلًا. What a horrible alternative for those that transgress their limits. For those that transgress their limits. What's the story? The story is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, usually you take your best friend as your leader. But to take your leader and to make your enemy be your leader is not done except by somebody that totally lost their understanding of things. Right? If you're in a battle, you choose somebody from your side to help you win the battle, not get somebody from your enemy that's going to help you lose the battle. That's going the other way around. بِئْسَ لِلظَّالِمِينَ بَدَلًا. What a horrible alternative for those that have transgressed the limit. But why did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala call them ظالمين? What is ظالم? ظالم, anybody that oppresses. A ظالم, anybody, a person that oppresses others. So why are they called oppressors? Anybody that transgresses the limit is called an oppressor. If you transgress the limit, you go against anyone in an unjustful way, you would be called an oppressor. So who did they go against? They even went against their own sake.
Yeah.
That's why they were called oppressors. They went against their own sake. They oppressed their own selves. مَا أَشْهَدْتُهُمْ خَلْقَ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ. They did not see, they did not witness the creation of the skies and the creation of earth, and did not even witness their own creation. And I do not take وَمَا كُنْتُ مُتَّخِذَ الْمُضِلِّينَ عَضُدًا. And I would not take those that go off the right path as supporters. These are misleading creatures. Why would I ask them? They didn't even... What's the issue here? ما أشهدتهم خلق السماوات والأرض. They did not witness not the creation of the earth, the skies, not the creation of the earth, not even their own creation. What is that telling you? So when we actually say that they didn't even witness any of that, meaning that they themselves are creatures. That they themselves are creatures. Who do you take as a leader? You would take as a leader a person or one that was even before the creation itself. Because if they are created, that would mean they're weak. If it's a creature, it's weak. Why? Because if it's a creature, that means its life, its death is not in its own hands. It doesn't sustain itself because it's a creature. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling you, if this is a creature, then it can't even sustain itself. You don't seek refuge or help or even leadership from somebody that's even weaker than you. Right? You don't seek help from somebody that's even weaker than you. If somebody is crippled, would you ask them to help you get up?
No.
They can't even get up themselves. They need help to get up themselves. Same thing. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala telling you, they're even weaker than you. When do they get stronger? This takes me to a hadith. This takes me to the hadith where the Prophet ﷺ actually says that during Ramadan, when Ramadan comes, all the shayateen are locked up. Are they literally locked up or not? Differences of opinions between scholars.
They're locked up.
Locked up and chained. Different opinions between scholars whether they're literally locked up, literally chained, or whether it's more of a metaphor. Imam al-Nawawi says it's not necessarily a metaphor and it's not literally locked up. He explains that and he says that simply when a person is strong in their deen, fasting and doing all that qiyam, they get stronger so their shaitan gets weaker. As if they are locked up.
Oh.
All right?
Yeah.
As if they are locked up. Meaning what? Meaning that it's you that feeds their strength or weakness.
Yeah.
Shayateen are generally weak. But in order to weaken them, it all depends on you.
Yeah.
You get stronger, they'll get weaker. You get weaker, they get stronger. It all depends on you. It all depends on you. And that's what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling you. They're actually creatures where they did not even witness earth. They did not witness the creation of anything, not even their own creation. Meaning that they too are creatures. So why would you take them as the awliya, as the ones to guide you? You take guidance from the one that made life be before it even existed.
What's the best way to fight them in Islam, especially?
With dhikr, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What did he say? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala actually said that my servants, لَيْسَ لَكَ عَلَيْهِمْ سُلْطَانٌ. عبادي, my servants. You're not going to be able to control them. Dhikr. Ibadi, who are the servants of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, whether the ones that do dhikr in action, in oral dhikr, whether it's behavioral dhikr, or whether that's visual dhikr. Visual dhikr, they perceive things based on the reality of what they are. Haqq batin. That's al-awliya. And awliya Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. ليس لك عليهم سلطان. You can't control them. وما كنت متخذ المضلين عضدا. What is that? المضلين are the ones that deceive others. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, I won't take those that deceive others as supporters. But does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala need supporters? Does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala need supporters? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't need supporters. But He created the malaika to do certain missions, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not need anyone. وَيَوْمَ يَقُولُ نَادِوا شُرَكَائِيَ الَّذِينَ زَعَمْتُمْ. On that day, when the day comes, and He would say, نَادُوا شُرَكَائِي, He would say, call on to those that you claimed were my partners. You claimed that they are my partners. فَدَعَوْهُمْ. So He would tell those that claimed that they were worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's partners, He would tell them, call on to those partners that you claimed were my partners. That's the first time they ever answered Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's order. What did they do? They actually went to call on them. Said, oh, come on.
So they did it.
They did it. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was not obligating them, was not ordering them to go call them.
Mm-hmm.
Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was belittling them, telling them, well, you know what? Go call them. Let me see what you're talking about. I want to show it to you. I want to show you that I don't have any partners. But you claimed them. But they actually went to go get them. They actually went, oh, let's go get them. فَدَوْعَوْهُمْ. They want to go get them. فَلَمْ يَسْتَجِيبُوا لَهُمْ.
When
Then,
is that sin happening?
on Judgment Day.
On Judgment.
On Judgment Day. فَدَعَوْهُمْ فَلَمْ يَسْتَجِيبُوا لَهُمْ. They called them and they didn't. فَلَمْ يَسْتَجِيبُوا لَهُمْ. And they refused. They refused to come. Why did they refuse to come? We've got nothing to do with this.
They know the truth.
They know that, well, because they know that if they were brought, they would be even held more accountable, because they would be now, it's like, oh, they're admitting. Because then it would mean that they're admitting to misleading others. فَدَعَوْهُمْ فَلَمْ يَسْتَجِيبُوا لَهُمْ. So they called them and they didn't respond. In another ayah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that they would call on to their leaders and say, you are the ones that misled us. The leaders and kubara'ahum and their chieftains and those that are held in high positions. He would say, hey, it's your fault. You're the one that misled us. And they would just respond, قَالُوا إِنَّا كُلٌّ فِيهَا. We're all in it. In other words, just shut up. There's nothing to brag about. That's exactly what they would say. It's like, قَالُوا كُلٌّ فِيهَا وَاسْكُتْ. Just be quiet. We're all here. There's no way that we can escape this. وَجَعَلْنَا بَيْنَهُمْ مَوْبِقًا. جَعَلْنَا بَيْنَهُمْ مَوْبِقًا. And between the leaders and the other ones, there was a mawbiqa. Al-mawbiqa is more like a separation, but not literally a separation. It was more like an ending, like a distance that they can't even communicate anymore. They're both going to be in that bad ending. وَرَأَى الْمُجْرِمُونَ النَّارِ. وَرَأَى الْمُجْرِمُونَ النَّارِ. And the criminals, they saw hellfire. فَظَنُّوا أَنَّهُمْ مُوَاقِعُوهَا. فَظَنُّوا. They saw the hellfire and they thought, or they ظنوا here, فَظَنُّوا أَنَّهُمْ مُوَاقِعُوهَا. And they became to a realization. Here, ظنوا, they became to a realization that they're going to be مواقعوها, meaning that they're going to be in it. Going to be in it. وَلَمْ يَجِدُوا عَنْهَا مَصْرِفًا. And they could not find any escape from it. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala keep us away from hellfire. Ameen ya Rabb. That is Surah Kahf, yes. وَلَقَدْ صَرَّفْنَا فِي هَذَا الْقُرْآنِ. The theme. After every story, there's a theme. وَلَقَدْ صَرَّفْنَا فِي هَذَا الْقُرْآنِ لِلنَّاسِ مِنْ كُلِّ مَثَلٍ وَكَانَ الْإِنسَانُ أَكْثَرَ شَيْءٍ جَدَلًا. And we gave man, صَرَّفْنَا, meaning we gave man the different patterns, the different detailed evidences in this Quran for people to see min kulli mathal, in different kinds of patterns, different ways of examples, in order to bring about patterns, to bring about evidences, to bring about examples for people to see and realize how things are drawn. Yet وَكَانَ الْإِنسَانُ أَكْثَرَ شَيْءٍ جَدَلًا. Yet al-insan, humans, and scholars had different opinions why al-insan is called al-insan. Is al-insan, humans, is the word coming from nisyan, or is the word coming from anasa, to mean to find tranquility in something? Like Adam found tranquility in Eve, and people want to, be in groups and etc. They find that tranquility in one another. Or is it from nisyan, or is it because they forget? Different opinions, not an issue. And man, or al-insan, أكثر شيء جدلا, is the most one to argue and debate things. Why? Because you want to connect it with the ayah before it, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is actually telling us the whole story of Adam, and with Iblis, the whole story of Adam, Iblis, and the Malaika, and then draws that example. The whole issue was about intellect. Now here it continues that man has an issue where they would think they're using intellect and intelligence, when in reality they're using ego as the center to define what's right and what's wrong for them, and not necessarily using intellect to help them see what's right and what's wrong. 2, intellect in itself, by itself, is not enough to help man know everything about the world. How do we know? Even in science, even in philosophy, your feelings, your 5 senses fail to help you know everything about the world around you. We don't know everything. What we know about the world is less than 4%. Is less than 4%, and without us realizing, then the amount that we know about the world is not enough to give us the purpose of why this world was created. Because the purpose preceded the creation of the world. It preceded the creation of life. So the purpose of life cannot be attained through our intellect, because our intellect is only capable of studying how things function, not necessarily why things function. Meaning, life, when it came into existence, there was a purpose and another intention that preceded life that made life into existence. In order to get to that, you cannot necessarily get to that by using your intellect. Your intellect is not capable of going past life to know anything about life. It can't go past life. So when we look at كَانَ الْإِنسَانُ أَكْثَرَ شَيْءٍ جَدَلًا, this is talking about something called epistemology. Epistemology is the sources of knowledge. Is that source of knowledge valid or not? How valid is it? Can we prove that it's a valid resource or not? And that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala actually told us about the stories of Adam, the story of Iblis, and all that, in order to help us find and figure out where we're heading, purpose of life, what to do, principles, etc. Yet man would think, because they can argue some things, they think that now they have exceeded their knowledge, they have exceeded with their argument far beyond any truth. And this is very common, by the way. Many times, especially with social media, Let me get a cup of water. Just
Habibti, just so you know, you're talking to some of those people right here.
yeah, I know that.
I'm one of them.
Oh, I'm not talking about that then. You know, many times, especially with social media, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala actually says and talks about those certain people and says, تَأْخُذُهُ الْعِزَّةُ بِالْإِثْمِ. What is that? They would take pride in the sin that they're committing. And think that, oh, I managed to make a dialogue with maybe a scholar or maybe something about Islam, and they would think that, oh wow, I actually won the argument. Why? Just because there was an argument that was held. They would think that it has given me the chance to be at the level to discuss big issues on Islam or big issues in fiqh, and the list goes on and on. كان الإنسان أكثر شيء جدلا. People are the most creatures to debate and argue things, and many times the argument is not out of knowledge but out of ignorance. Ibn Asakir, who is a historian, Muslim historian from Damascus, Syria, he said a very important thing. He says, whoever discussed something that he's not specialized in, they will come about and will bring أتى بالعجائب, means that they will bring in things that are, ajaib is the weirdest things ever. They will bring about weird things and they will think, wow, I'm so smart. If it's not your specialty, be humble and actually say, I don't know. Don't argue about something that you don't know. Because the second that you argue about it, it's not that you're revealing your knowledge, but you're revealing your ignorance. من كثر كلامه كثر سقطه. Whoever, the more you talk, the more likely you will reveal the mistakes. In other words, more likely your speech is going to hold mistakes in it. Don't talk too much, because all it will reveal is the wrong and the mistakes that your words carry. When we talk about al-jadal, arguments, many times it's actually people have a resource. This is really important. When do arguments happen? When you don't have a base to start from, and you start getting lost in different arguments because you don't have a center and a lens to look through. You're going to get lost in so many different arguments because you don't have a center to start from. You don't have a lens to look through. You're going to get lost. If you don't have a home, you're just going to get scattered all around. We need a base. We need a base to start from. Same thing when we talk about science. When you talk about science, there are certain basics we start from, which is how much can we depend on our senses to learn about the world? How much can we depend on numbers? How much can we depend on 1, 2, 3? And that's epistemology. But when you are studying the world, you're studying life from no resource to depend on, from no resource that is capable of standing firm to use as the main center to understand things about the world. You're just going to an argument after an argument after an argument, which is what a lot of philosophers fell in. an argument after an argument after an argument in ethics, in purpose of life, in cosmology, in. And then they would get into these corners, and without them realizing, they're just turning into circles. When you don't have a center, when you don't have a lens to see how to bring about that argument, you're just going to get lost. A lot of the people that come to me saying that they have some misconceptions, or they're lost within a lot of things about Islam, etc. A lot of times they started, and usually it started out when they actually began reading the websites that contained all the misconceptions. So it was a misconception after misconception after misconception. And here's what happens. They'll throw misconception 1, and then they'll throw misconception 2, and then misconception 3. So their mind is so full with misconceptions because it started out when they used the wrong epistemology. When they thought internet was a valid and reliable resource. And that these people that are putting out all these misconceptions are somehow specialists. They're somehow, they would think that they're specialists, when in reality, these people are not specialists. So what am I going to start with when your whole idea, you don't even know the resources of what makes Islam? You can tell me, okay, that ayah contradicts that ayah, and I'll tell you, okay, so you consider the Quran as a valid resource, or you consider that I'm going to discuss here. So if you're going to let me say, border and tell me, here's what I want to discuss. That's the resource I want to discuss. Then we'll go into a discussion. But if you're going to bring about and cherry pick every single misconception, who knows where you got it from? What misconceptions? Am I going to be writing a book on each and every single wrong argument you brought in? I don't have time to do that. You got to start with getting the right source first. That's where it starts.
But if you like to argue, it's very addictive. And sometimes you feel good from it. If you're a person who argues, it becomes addictive, and then you like it. And even sometimes when you know something is truth is this, when you're not supposed to do it, you still do it. So there's an addictive nature to some of these diseases that sometimes, it's the nafsi and how you control it. Because you teach me right now about arguments and how it's never going to benefit me.
Well, the argument that we're talking about here is really the argument of the purpose of life. And that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala actually brought this issue, because it was talking about the purpose of life, how things started out, the story of malaika, the story of right, evil, good, what defines principle, what defines ethics, what defines the purpose of life. This is what it's talking about, because your understanding of what is good, what is wrong, because when you're talking about malaika, you're talking about Iblis, you're talking about Adam, you're talking about, okay, where's the definition of good? Where's the purpose of life? What proves that? There's no way that you can get to that unless you actually have a valid resource of information. Are you with me here? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is basically telling you, that's the Quran. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is basically telling you that this information you can't get through, you cannot get to using your intellect. So here's a piece. You're going to argue about something, but guess what? You can argue all you want, but your argument, your intellect cannot go far in knowing information about the world, about life, about the purpose of life, unless you actually have a different kind of a piece of information that preceded existence itself. Are you with me here?
I'm with you, but one day you explained this thing in a very good way, and you said, acknowledge how you said not everything you can know, and you said the Quran and the messages are revealed to us through the prophets, so that we know that other piece that we cannot know, that only comes from Allah, And that's why we have the Risala, the Quran, to tell us things that our intellects cannot understand.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. So here, وَمَا مَنَعَ النَّاسَ أَن يُؤْمِنُوا. So what's keeping people? وَمَا مَنَعَ النَّاسَ أَن يُؤْمِنُوا. What prevented people from believing إِذْ جَاءَهُمُ الْهُدَى, when guidance came to them, وَيَسْتَغْفِرُوا رَبَّهُم, and they would seek forgiveness from their Lord. What happened? إِلَّا أَن تَأْتِيهُمْ سُنَّةُ الْأَوَّلِينَ. What happened is that the same story that happened previously, Sunnatul Awwaleen, like the same pattern, the same story from the nations before them, they are going to do it again and again. The same cycle, the same mistake that the nations before them had committed, they would do it again. Which is what? Which is that they would be so confined in just wanting to believe that this world, there's nothing behind it. There is no purpose but the purpose of us living our pleasures, just enjoying our time. And they would forget, they would focus on these pleasures, on building their dunya, and they would argue that no, there is no purpose. Now, right here, أَوْ يَأْتِيَهُمُ الْعَذَابُ قُبُلًا. What happens? That the Sunnatul Awwaleen, the previous nations, they denied all these things, but it is only when the punishment comes to them, that's when they would start thinking about it. Well, so what did they say? What did the Prophet say? Is going to be their question. What was requested of us? وَمَا نُرْسِلُ الْمُرْسَلِينَ إِلَّا مُبَشِّرِينَ وَمُنذِرِينَ. Here's another epistemology, that all the وَمَا نُرْسِلُ الْمُرْسَلِينَ, and the reason why we sent the mursaleen, the messengers, we only sent them as mubashirin, to bring glad tidings. First, it's tabshir. First, it's to bring about a missionary, to bring about a glad tiding, and to congratulate people, to tell them there's a reward. وَمُنذِرِينَ, and to warn them. Now, why is tabshir before tabshir, meaning to bring glad tidings before warning? Is because man usually likes reward before you use the method of punishment. And that's also for tarbiyah. Say, if you do this, I'll give you this, rather than say, if you don't do this, this is what's going to happen. But you still need both. You still need both. Do this, and you get this. But if you don't do it, this is going to be the consequence. All right? But start out with, if you do this, I'll give you this. And the Prophet ﷺ told the Sahabi, said that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent us mubashirin la munaffirin. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent us to bring glad tidings to people and not to rebel them away from Islam. وَيُجَادِلُ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا بِالْبَاطِلِ. And those that denied Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they would argue with بالباطل. They would argue يجادل الذين كفروا بالباطل. They would argue using wrong and false arguments ليضحضوا به الحق, in order to refute truth. So they would bring about false arguments and false basis in order to refute truth. You know, subhanallah, I don't know if I should say this or not, but I'll say it. What?
Are you sure?
I think I'm sure.
Are you alive?
I'm live. A disagreement happened at my work at St. Catherine University. A disagreement happened where some of the professors were not, let me say, were transgressing their limit and were talking against Islam. So the students came to me as a chaplain and complained that some professors, Professor X and Professor Y, that they were transgressing the limits. So I got in And I was asked to give the main lecture for all the university about Islam. And I talked about how a lot of the information that is presented as education is actually miseducation in the name of education. And that, unfortunately, many are not capable of going to the resources of Islam, but actually go to secondary sources of Islam and end up making major mistakes in understanding Islam and even presenting it. And even many that are specialized in Islamic studies are actually very weak even in their resources in studying Islam. Well, now that's not only St. Catherine, but that's even Harvard, where there's only one professor that is capable of speaking Arabic, in other words, being able to go to the resources. Now, I was called out by the provost, who's acting like under the vice president of the university. I didn't know what she wanted. So I went to her office and she said, "You know what you said the other day was something that knocked us all out." She was like, she's African American, and she said, "I was really surprised about what you said, and it made me think." I really dared. I thought I was going to get fired that day, but I still had to say it, and I still had to make it clear that a lot of what you talk about education is actually miseducation. And she said, I was really surprised. She said, "That was very strong of you to say that, but I don't know how we can present that in different ways."
Not Aisha's way.
I don't know. That's exactly what she said. And then I said, well, it's really important to make sure that whoever wants to speak about Islam, that they know their grounds, they know their limit, and that they understand that they should know how far they go in discussing Islam if they're not specialized about it. The boss that's responsible over me, she actually disagreed and said, "We don't want you to go far in going against the professors and against the faculty, because it's not gonna be peaceful." So my boss, the boss, I was like, okay, we'll just make sure that we build bridges. She said, "You're a chaplain, so build bridges." And I said, okay, but they're not specialized, so they got to know their grounds. So after that lecture, when the provost called me, she said, "Listen," this is exactly how she said it. She said, "Listen, when I have somebody and I give them heads up that if you're going to step on my toes, and I told you to move out of the way, but you still decide to stay in your place, expect to get your toes stepped on."
You told her that?
She told me that.
Oh.
She told me that.
Wow.
So I said, "So what do you think I should do?" And she said, "You go, girl."
Oh.
I was so surprised. But that's exactly what she said. "You go, girl. No. You do what you think is right." They stepped on Islam's toes. Well, they got to make sure that they don't go beyond their limits. Keep going. And subhanAllah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala opens the doors.
You see?
Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala opens the doors. I was really surprised. This is the provost. I thought she was going to tell me, "You're fired, girl. Why would you go that far?" Because that was nothing but attacking the ground and the basis of how they discuss Islam, that you guys are not specialized, so you better watch out. Don't present something you're not an expert in.
But even if the students are coming to them, like, why are they like?
Well, that's a whole different story. Anyhow, لِيَدْحِضُوا بِالْحَقِّ. So here we're seeing that people not specialized presenting Islam and talking about Islam when they're not even specialized. And one of the stories, I know this is a little off, but one of the stories is there was a class, the course is actually called Islamic philosophy. And the course description said that it was going to discuss Islamic philosophy from the 6th century and the Muslim women philosophers from the 6th century until our time, and it was going to discuss the Muslim women feminists from the 6th century. Sounds very catchy, but guess what? There's no such thing as Muslim philosophers from the 6th century. The Prophet ﷺ himself was born in 632 AD. This is real. The first Muslim philosopher was al-Kindi, and he wasn't born until the 9th century. So what are you talking about? Number 3, there was no such thing as a Muslim woman philosopher ever. Number 4, there weren't any Muslim women feminists throughout history. So what are you talking about? If this is the course description in just 2 lines, what if I would go in detail about the course details? We're going to be finding embarrassing mistakes. Girl, the provost, she was nearly going to do what we call latim. She was really going to slap her face. I can't believe something like this so embarrassing is happening on campus. But
Wait, did you tell her about that?
I told her about it. She was shocked. She was like, oh my God, that is embarrassing. I was like, Dr. Thomas, imagine this is going to be a credit that is going to be presented at other universities that is as accredited. When they look into the course description, it's going to be so embarrassing.
So they're going to take that away, though.
Well, they did actually decide, and the professor that wanted to teach or was teaching that subject, she said, "Oh, I'm not specialized in it. I just wanted to do the university a favor." It's like, I'm sorry, was that the miseducation in the name of education? Hello.
Like a whole college.
But subhanallah, that's the thing, is that many times when they're teaching Islam, they don't even have the resources. So here, يُجَادِلُ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا. A lot of times they're in the name of education. It's actually miseducation in the name of education. And what are they trying to do? لِيُضْحِدْ بِهِ الْحَقِّ, in order to refute the truth. وَاتَّخَذُوا آيَاتِي وَمَا أُنذِرُوا هُزُوًا. And they take اتَّخَذُوا آيَاتِي, they would take the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the verses of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the miracles of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and what they were warned about, which is the purpose of life, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is testing it, huzwa, as in ridicule. They would take it in mockery and consider it, this is nothing but a myth. Ridicule. When in reality, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this is an epistemology right here. Anyways, there is no way for you to know the facts about life using your intellect, because this preceded life, period. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling you of something that you can never get through your own intellect about life. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent you these messages with these prophets. وَمَنْ أَظْلَمُ مِمَّنْ ذُكِّرَ بِآيَةِ رَبِّهِ. And there's nobody considered as far or committing a bigger oppression than a person that was reminded of their Lord's miracle, yet فَأَعْرَضَ عَنْهَا. فَأَعْرَضَ عَنْهَا, meaning that they would turn their backs on it and they would forget what they had committed. In مَا قَدَّمَتْ يَدَاهُ, it's a metaphor, because قَدَّمَتْ يَدَاهُ means what their hands committed. But this is a metaphor to mean what they have done in behavior, in action. What is the reason for that? Well, إِنَّا جَعَلْنَا عَلَى قُلُوبِهِمْ أَكِنَّةً. إِنَّا جَعَلْنَا means that we have put on their hearts, on their hearts, أَكِنَّة. أَكِنَّة is like a seal. أَيَّفْقَهُوهُ, and أَيَّفْقَهُوهُ, أَكِنَّة, like a seal, and they're not capable of understanding it. وَفِي آذَانِهِمْ وَقْرًا, and their ears are sealed. So what does that mean? Is it that it's not their fault, it's Allah's fault that He made them not understand, not feel, not resonate, and they're not responsible for it? Or how do we understand this? Number one, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave Adam free will. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave everybody the miracles around them. But man, كلا بل ران على قلوبهم ما كانوا يكسبون. What happened? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave you a pure nature, but your own, that you can decide to put yourself in a different nature, i.e. meaning environment. That environment that you put yourself in was something that you decided to put yourself in. That changed your nurture. Are you with me here? That changed your nurture, that changed how you receive things, and that affected your heart. But it started with what? It started with how you let your own free will, how you decided to let your guidance be based on pleasure. So it's not that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one that sealed your heart,
It's the choices.
but it's actually the choices that you made, the consequences that there's going to be something that comes with it. You decide to eat something spicy, expect to get tingling and burning in your mouth.
Yes.
You decided to put yourself in a bar, well, expect that you would be in an environment that's going to nothing but work on your pleasures, and you're not going to find pleasure in halal. And then you're going to get lost within that. You only decided to eat some certain foods where you're going to expect to pay the price. You put yourself in a certain environment, and then that brings in a nurture of different motives, a different kind of a discipline, a different kind of a tazkiyah. And that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling you, well, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created your body prone to different things. You drink, you become drunk. You make dhikr, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will open your heart. You make salah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will direct you more. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that's what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَالَّذِينَ جَاهَدُوا فِينَا لَنَهْدِيَنَّهُمْ سُبُلَنَا. Those that put some effort in order to find the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is promising you, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will open doors for you. Doors of what? Of guidance. You have to take the step. You have to take the start. But if you expect that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would give you the guidance, you gotta put an effort. You gotta put an effort. Put the effort, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will change even what's in your heart. Same thing. You eat more sugar, expect to get diabetes and obesity. You decided to take that. Simple. It's a pattern. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created the pattern, and the results of the pattern come with it. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created the pattern, and with the pattern, He also created the results. Right? He also created the results. Same thing. He created the pattern for you of guidance, and with the result comes with it guidance. Open heart, seeing the unseen, right? Becomes a different world. Same thing. You decide to take a path of misguidance, expect your heart to go into just finding pleasure in all these different animal things, in just body, drinking, the list goes on and on. What do you feed? What do you feed your body? How do you do the awliya part? How do you guide? Who do you use as your mentor? So right here, it's not that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one that's concealing their hearts, is that كَلَّا بَلْ رَانَ عَلَى قُلُوبِهِمْ مَا كَانُوا يَكْسِبُونَ, as the ayah in Surah al-Mutaffifin, verily their hearts had been sealed or concealed because of what they have committed. Meaning, the action and the result is actually in a pattern. It goes in a pattern. وَفِي آذَانِهِمْ وَقْرًا. What is that talking about? Now, the ability to understand and the ability to see and hear things is all sources and resources for understanding. Alright? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling you that the actions, نَسِيَ مَا قَدَّمَتْ يَدَاهُ, the actions actually brought about with it the result of the action. The result that comes from the action. What is the action? Well, مَا قَدَّمَتْ يَدَاهُ, they committed certain things, and the result was that their hearts got
Sealed.
sealed. The other tool of knowledge, our senses, their ears also got sealed. And وَإِن تَدْعُهُمْ إِلَى الْهُدَى, and when you call them for guidance, فَلَنْ يَهْدُوا إِذًا أَبَدًا, then they're not going to be able to find any guidance. Why? Because they put in the action, their mind, their hearts were not able to comprehend truth, their ears were not able to hear what you're talking about because of the nature they put themselves in. Their mind is so busy thinking about those pleasures, their mind, their heart, their eyes couldn't see guidance anymore.
Because we see wrong things. How
Absolutely.
we see.
The guidance, you see, your tool of understanding the world around you,
Five senses.
5 senses. The 5 senses are right now not functioning well. Why? Simply because your behavior was nurtured somewhere else. You nurtured your behavior somewhere else, and that's why those senses are not functioning to see the truth any longer.
Because they are busy with haram.
Because they're busy with haram.
Is busy with haram.
Absolutely.
How am I gonna
They're
see
busy
it?
with haram. If you're looking at the wrong things all the time, you're putting yourself with groups and people that are talking, that are constantly talking about pleasure, and that's all that's making them busy with. To talk to you about akhirah is going to be boring. To you, it's going to be boring because you're so used to eating fast pleasure and engaging in fast pleasure that to talk to you about another type of a late pleasure to you is like, I need to feel something. I want something. No patience. I need to feel something. They're so used to that fast food. Everything they want it fast, and that's where the danger that we live in actually comes in, is when people are so used to living that lifestyle, they don't realize that the action has another type of a result on the qalb, on the tazkiyah, on the tazkiyah of what you see, what you hear, what you say, your actions, and how your heart responds to dhikr. Go ahead.
Yeah, but okay, they don't see, right? But do they have to make the decision to change, or can somebody pray for them or help them change?
Well, it's a number of things. You see, no matter you can. Dua changes al-qadar. Dua, making dua, asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and praying for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Ya Allah, guide my son, guide my friend, whatever it is. That changes al-qadar. That changes what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had already previously known about them. But at the same time, the person, him or herself, they have to decide to make the change. They have to decide to make the change. They have to decide that maybe I need to change my life. إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يُغَيِّرُ مَا بِقَوْمٍ حَتَّى يُغَيِّرُوا مَا بِأَنفُسِهِمْ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not change the situation within around you unless you take the path, you make the change, you put in the effort to change yourself. You have to make the change. You have to start. You have to put in an effort.
No free lunch.
No free lunch. You have to put in the effort. Same thing when we're talking about hidayah. The person has to put in the effort.
I feel like we're not told that enough. That's
Yeah.
what
You know,
twisted my mind.
here's one thing.
Well,
A lot of
maybe
times
no free lunch.
when we don't realize, when we don't realize is many times people would take religion as an experiment. And this is really dangerous. So she would say, oh, I tried wearing the hijab, or I tried praying, or I tried this.
I'm tried.
Oh, exactly. And this is the age, Allah Akbar, Allah Akbar. This is the age of experiment, and they would think that they can experiment the religion the same way. You can't experiment religion the same way, because religion, it takes more work to help you open up and actually see the things around you. To get from the level of Islam to the level of Iman, it needs a lot of work. It's not an experiment. It's not an experiment to say, I tried it, I didn't feel anything. Did you actually think you were going to get Jibreel alayhi salam coming to you to tell you, okay, now, I have assigned you to be a prophet? The other day, guys, just on a side, my son, he said, Mom, what do you study to become a prophet?
He's smart. He's aiming for this guy. That's very smart though. I want everything. Why do I need mediocrity?
I never thought about that, really.
Yeah, because it's good to, for me, I believe if I'm supposed to, like if there's sabiqun, why not work for sabiqun and I'm gonna die in this akhirah, It's good to be motivated now. I mean, he's not gonna be a prophet, he's a little kid, he doesn't understand it. But he's aiming high,
وَرَبُّكَ الْغَفُورُ ذُو الرَّحْمَةِ. And your Lord is the most forgiving with and ذُو الرَّحْمَةِ. ذُو الرَّحْمَةِ means the one that owns mercy. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala contained all mercy. Meaning that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and this reminds me of the hadith. The hadith where the Prophet ﷺ actually said that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not in need of punishing people. But because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is most just, that He gave people the free will to choose, and they would decide what path they want. In the end, is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave guidance, assigned guidance, and it's people's responsibility to take the step and make a change. But it's not an experiment. It's not an experiment. Religion, you can't study religion and think that, I actually have an experiment and I'm trying religion. I tried to wear hijab and I didn't feel anything. You're not going to feel anything. No, seriously, I've had.
That's so true.
No, you live it. You don't. It's not an experiment. It's like, I didn't
It has
feel
to
it.
be here.
Of course,
Change has to be here.
of course, change has to be here.
Yeah,
But does that mean that people can say for example, with the hijab, can they say, I don't want to wear the hijab until I feel it? You know what I mean?
Or I'm ready.
My heart, I'm not
The-
When are you
You see here.
Exactly.
Here's the thing.
Or they take off the
Um,
hijab saying, I don't represent
Yeah, I
the
don't
person
feel
who
like
a
it's.
hijab should be.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, we're in an age where everything is based on individualism. And this individualism, no, this is real. Individualism where every single person thinks that they're the center and they define right and every single person has their own definition of right and wrong. Every single person has their definition and or how they view what should be right and wrong, and every single person has their interpretation of what religion should look like or what truth and spirituality should be, and etc. And without them realizing, they're actually putting themselves as the lords to define haqq and batil, to define truth and misguidance. You can't be the definition when you yourself didn't even create yourself. What does that have to do with anything? Well, truth was actually assigned by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala before the world even existed. So you're a creature. You can't be the person to define truth, because truth is discovered, not made up. You don't create truth. truth is supposed to be going in parallel with the pattern of creation, with the laws of creation, with the laws of with the rules and the purpose of life too. That's truth. You don't make and create your own truth. For me to say this is right and this is wrong, it actually has to precede and be in parallel with the things that were created before, and the purpose. Where am I heading? For me to say this is right and this is wrong, there's a certain purpose. Where am I going? Because to say this is right and this is wrong, this life is a path. This life is a path. But if you don't know where the destination is, how can you be the person to tell me where to go when you don't even know where the destination is? You understand what I'm saying? So unless you have some knowledge of where to head to, I would tell you this is the right path or this is the wrong path. But if you too are inside this dynamic of life, then how and who are you to say if I'm right or wrong? Because you're in the dynamic of life. You would have to have a bird's eye that was able to see, one, before creation, and two, where I'm heading, which is the purpose of life. But if I am myself, and that's why within that ayah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, مَا أَشْهَدْتُهُمْ خَلْقَ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ وَلَا خَلْقَ أَنفُسِهِمْ. They didn't even see the creation of the skies and the stars and everything, and they didn't even see their own creation. So how could they be the ones to decide where guidance should be? And that's the same thing. How is anybody that is a creature going to be able to define right and wrong when they themselves are within the creation? They can't even know where the destination is. Wasallam, I said Muhammad, we'll see you all next week, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum.
I have a quick question. So you know how like you leave and then you come back, like say I come back for your class or semester, do I have to pay the